Good evening, everyone. So appreciative for everyone joining us tonight as we celebrate Black History Month here at Virginia Commonwealth University School of Dentistry, where we are celebrating Black women this particular Black History Month with our outstanding panelists and all that they have accomplished. This is our Diversity Dialogues virtual conversation series where we're going to talk about their lives, their careers, and their journeys to dentistry. We have with us tonight Dr. Rashondia Gaines, who's a Florida native, an associate professor, director of Predoctoral Clinic, director of the faculty practice, director of the evening clinic. I don't know if I'm leaving anything out with all the hats that you wear, at Nova Southeastern University College of Dental Medicine in their Department of Restorative Sciences and Public Health Dentistry. And I tell people all the time, she does not look like she's been anywhere for 24 years on faculty, but she has. And so I think that's amazing. So we welcome Dr. Gaines. We also have Dr. Rana Graham-Montaque, who did both her predoctoral DDS education here and her specialty training in pediatric dentistry here at VCU. She's the owner of Pediatric Dental Specialists of Williamsburg, where she offers a variety of services to children and special needs patients. And she's a diplomat of the American Board of Pediatric Dentistry. And today was an OR day for her. So very, very busy. And then of course, we have also Dr. Monique Phipps with us, who is an associate professor in the Department of Restorative Dentistry and the Senior Director of Veterans Services and Care Equity at the University of Colorado School of Dental Medicine. So thank you so much for being with us tonight and joining us. Folks are signing on. We are recording this as well. So just excited for you to be here, excited to have this conversation with all of you about your time at VCU and your journey to being a dentist, right? So I'm Carlos Smith. I'm our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the School of Dentistry, as well as our Director of Ethics Curriculum. I'm an Associate Professor in our Department of Dental Public Health and Policy. So I'm excited to continue this conversation and get it going. So I teach ethics here, right? And so one of the frameworks that is popular or gaining popularity is this notion of narrative ethics. And so where you really learn a narrative and a story about people to kind of inform how we make ethical decisions. And so I think it's really interesting and really neat to also hear the narratives of all of our guests this evening, right? So I would love for you to share with us your story. Where does it start? Maybe how you grew up, your family of origin, what kind of influence did maybe that family of origin have on you, and how you looked at the world and how you viewed the world. And if you could share that with us this evening. We'll start with Dr. Gaines, if that's okay, who's joining us from Portugal, by the way. So huge hats off to Dr. Gaines for being willing to do this, and a super dedicated alum to want to join us this evening all the way from Portugal. So Dr. Gaines.
Good evening, everyone. Well, dentistry has always been a passion of mine ever since I was young. I am the oldest of four. My father's an attorney. My mom was a school teacher. I chose the path of dentistry, and my other three siblings are all attorneys. My dad wanted to push me in that direction because I started working in his office when I was younger. And he's like, you should be a lawyer. And I was like, no, I shouldn't. And he asked me, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to be a dentist. And he thought that he would deter me by having me work with a friend of his who was an oral surgeon. And actually that just fueled my passion even more. So I knew in 10th grade that I 100% absolutely positively wanted to be a dentist. And I knew in 4th grade that I absolutely 100% wanted to attend Hampton University. VCU was just something that just kind of happened because I was in Virginia. I've always had this fascination with teeth. People always thought that I was crazy, especially my cousins. It's like, hey, your tooth is loose, let me pull it out, you know, that type of thing. At one point I thought that I might want to do oral surgery, you know, because that was my background initially, because I worked as an assistant with the oral surgeon from 10th grade up until my 2nd year of dental school. But then, once I really saw what it was about, I wanted to be more connected to my patients and not just only see them when they were in pain or they were having problems. So after I attended Hampton and I attended VCU, I did a 1-year AEGD residency at University of Missouri, Kansas City. I think I was the first Black resident that they had in the program back in 98, 99. And afterwards, I got married and moved back to Florida. And I needed a job right away. But during dental school, Dr. David Surratt, you guys I'm sure know who he is, he kind of pushed me in the direction of academia. He approached me about it when I was a junior or in my 3rd year dental school. And he's like, you should think about being a professor. And I was like, no, and they don't make any money. And then here I am, a professor. So once I attended my residency, they had just opened a dental school in Florida, South Florida, actually, which is where I'm from. And because I had some experience in teaching, because Dr. Surratt and Dr. Barnes, who is my module leader, they encouraged me to go into teaching. So they had me teaching dental anatomy lab while I was a 4th year dental student. And then prior to moving to Kansas City, the school actually hired me as a clinical instructor during the summer. So I ended up grading my classmates' work who were trying to finish school. So that was kind of cool. I got to sign their things off. And then I moved and got the job at Nova Southeastern. They opened in 97 and I started teaching in 99 and I have been there ever since. So, and then I'm a proud mom of 2 kids. I'm divorced, but I'm a proud mom. My daughter's 20 and she's a junior at Howard University. It pains me to say. And my son is a junior in high school who is considering Howard as well. He's a state diver. He's ranked 6th in the state for 1 meter springboard diving. So he may dive for them when he attends college.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing all of that. And so how about you, Dr. Graham-Montaque? What's your story, your upbringing, maybe how you first got exposed to dentistry?
So I'm a native of West Point, Virginia, which isn't that far from Hampton University. It's a small river town. And honestly, unlike Ray, where she had dentistry on the mind, I had no clue what I wanted to become. My mother was a clerk for the Naval Weapons Station, a government worker. My father, we joke about him receiving his bachelor's degree slightly before I received my bachelor's degree. And then he received his MBA slightly before I received my master's. So I was challenging him to the doctor. And actually, that was the one degree I beat him at. So, I didn't come from a family where, they had, we have a slew of professionals, degrees. But growing up, watching The Cosby Show, Cliff Huxtable, Claire Huxtable, actually inspired me to want to be a physician. So early on as a child, my family, they would say, oh, you're a quick thinker like Claire Huxtable, you're going to be an attorney. And I was like, oh, no, I'm going to be a physician like Cliff Huxtable. So coming to Hampton University, that was my initial goal, was that I was going to go to medical school eventually. I did grow up with a very service-oriented family where my father was the deacon in the church, the trustee in the church. He's now a pastor. So everything in our life was about service and giving back. And so whether that was my father putting a roof on the elderly neighbor's home or cutting grass regularly and upkeep of the church in the community, everything in my childhood was about service and helping others in need. So I think that definitely led me towards a career that would in turn help others.
Awesome, awesome. And I do want to say, I know because we have potentially some of the students from Hampton that are in the medical post-bac program. You did that program, right?
I did.
Yeah.
And so eventually, after finishing my degree at Hampton, my bachelor's, I did molecular biology. I was still confused. I didn't know if I truly wanted to go to medical school or if I wanted to do a PhD. And so Dr. Marino, Harold Marino, an orthodontist, was hired to start a master's in dentistry, or excuse me, master's in medical science program that was geared at increasing our numbers at Hampton University with providing or getting students into dental school and medical school. And so I spent 2 years where I received the master's in medical science and did research. And I figured with the master's degree, by those 2 years, I should have a clue of what I wanted to become. And he told me to look closer at dentistry. That's how I was introduced to dentistry. He said, I don't know if you want to go into medicine. They're having a lot of issues with managed care. My wife's a physician. She's not as pleased with the career. Take a deeper look at dentistry. And I think what was inspiring to me was that with dentistry, I was I'm not going to say I'm a great artist, but I actually have some artistic ability. And so I think dentistry is one of those fields where, it's a combination of art. It's a combination of healthcare. You have medicine. I work at a hospital on Wednesdays and I get to experience the whole medicine side as well. But also I could do research. So it gave me a lot of areas where if I wasn't sure, or if I didn't, I could teach like how you all are professors. So I like the fact that it had so many areas that if I was not sure of which field I wanted to go into, I had a lot of flexibility to maneuver and get that career that I hired. So it was definitely very appealing.
Thanks for that, for including that. Yeah. And so Dr. Phipps, how about you? What was your upbringing? What's your story? How did you get exposed or interested in dentistry?
So my story is kind of similar to both of our other panelists here. I'm strange in the fact that I did not grow up in the States. My father was in the military. So he did 25 years in the Air Force.
Wow.
And my mother she started out as a teacher who became an administrator still with the government. And she still does that. She actually is still over in Japan as an elementary school teacher. So growing up, I was born in the Northeast, which, we weren't there, but we literally moved like maybe every 2 to 4 years. So I was constantly going someplace, but I would come back every summer. My parents were from very big families, both from Mississippi. My mom actually went to school or got a degree. My father did not. He was just in the military. So we didn't come from a lot of professionals either. My mom is one of 3 sisters, but there's 12 in her family. And but the girls were the ones who got the education and the boys went to military, or they didn't, they just got a job. Same with my father's kind of upbringing as well. So I had an aunt who was a nurse. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I think I was typical, like most people who come into dentistry. I needed braces. When I was younger, I had this crazy looking tooth that I was like, oh my God, like, can we get my tooth fixed, Ma? And I actually went on base, to have my dental care done. And it was great. And I think the dentist there is really what influenced me. And I was in 8th grade. Dr. Gaines had me beat by, I was a little bit early for her, but in 8th grade, I got my braces finally off. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I think I can do. And most kids usually change their minds. And I didn't. I just said, this is what I'm going to be. And this is what I'm doing. I love the fact that you could be a doctor, but still be artistic, like Rana was saying here. And I was good with my hands. I like to do a lot of stuff, but I grew up mostly in Asia. So, and I stayed in Japan the longest, and I was really big on Japanese art. I don't know, it's just different. So my mom actually went to Jackson State in Mississippi, and I did not grow up. I guess I did grow up in a diverse culture because I lived in Europe and I've lived in Asia growing up, but I never lived in the United States. I lived for 1 year in Wisconsin, and I had never been around just African Americans besides my family. So I really was like, I'm gonna go to an HBCU. That's what I want to do. So I did this like HBCU tour one summer when we were home visiting like family members, and I just fell in love with Hampton. I didn't have a single family member in Virginia, not one. And I remember I did their summer program. It was like before starting Hampton. And I remember my mom like literally dropped me, like we came in like on a Friday. She set me up in the dorm and she was out on Sunday. And that was like, so I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. So yeah, I got into, I went to Hampton, and then I also applied to different dental schools. I ended up staying in Virginia, going to VCU. And my career journey is also similar to Dr. Gaines. I went to an AGD at VCU as well. At the time, it was Dr. Hazelton, who was the director. And she is the one who actually encouraged me to go into teaching, her and Dr. Surratt. He knew I was a military family, and he thought, why don't you go into the military, or you could think about dental education? And I was like, Dr. Gaines, I was like, I am not qualified to teach. Like, I just need to get out of here. Like, this is a lot. The dental school was a lot. It was just different. But long story short, I ended up going out to the West Coast. Like I said, I had no family in Virginia. I wasn't married at the time. And I said, why don't I move to, my parents had purchased a house in Las Vegas at the time. And so I moved to Nevada, and I was with my mom. One day we drove by and they had just started the dental school down there. And we were just being nosy. I don't even know what got into us, but we were walking around the building, and this is how small the world is. We ran into my mother's HR director from Japan, who was working at the dental school. And she was an African-American. Yeah, she's since passed away. Her name was Lois Reinauer. She was a sweetheart. Anyway, she was like, she sees my mom, she says her name, and she's like, what are you doing? And we're like, I don't know, we're just walking around the building being nosy. And and she's like, oh, my daughter's a dentist. And so she was like, you should teach here. And I was maybe a year and a half out of school, and I'm like, I'm not qualified to teach. I'm just in practice for like a year and a half. And she said, you can teach. Like, they need more young faculty members, and they definitely need more people of color and females at the time. And I was just like, okay. So I put in my application, really not even thinking they would select me, and they ended up hiring me. And I did. I stayed there for 17 years at UNLV. And I just recently moved to Colorado this last year, and I've been teaching here in Colorado. So that's kind of my journey.
No, that's great. Thank you guys for sharing that. It's so interesting, like how organic almost everyone's story is, and like how you had this one conversation or this one person influence you to think about this. So of course, I can't be on this conversation with all of my fellow Hamptonians and not talk about Hampton, right? So one of the things that I found super fascinating, because I didn't go to VCU for dental school when I started working here, it was kind of like, I just wanted to know, because I'm a history nerd, like, who was our first Black graduate? And people kind of like fumbled with the answer. And I was like, no, this should be something like, people should be able to split this information. Like, why doesn't somebody like know this like concretely, right? And so I began to explore. I had some conversations with development. And then I found out that our first Black graduate from the School of Dentistry was actually a Hampton alum. So his name is James Avery Booker Jr. He actually came here for dental school. He taught at Howard for a year or two, and then went to medical school and was a practicing flight surgeon for the military for many, many years. And some of you may know Carla Booker, who is a physician in Atlanta, but she's his daughter and went to Hampton. And then, you know, they're like a 4-generation kind of Hampton family. But I just thought it was such an interesting tidbit. And then that all of you also went to Hampton, like our first graduate. So with that said, what's the significance of Hampton to your story? And what's the significance, you think, of HBCUs in the pathway of getting people into dental school and getting people to be, as we need more practitioners and providers of color? And that anybody can take that.
I'll go first.
Sure.
I actually chose Hampton because my dad's sister and my aunt graduated from nursing school there. So when I was in 4th grade, I attended the graduation, and when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, this is where I'm going to school. I was like, I was not going to be deterred. My mom was like, don't you think you need to apply to other schools? Nope, that's the only school I'd apply to. And she's like, you are kind of risking it, aren't you? I was like, no, I'm getting into this school. This is where I'm going. And she was like, well, just do me a favor, apply to a few more just in case. So I applied to a few more colleges, but Hampton was it for me. And I feel the HBCU experience is like no other. The connections, the relationships, everything is on a totally different level. And I told my daughter, I said, if you want me to help you pay for college, go be an HBCU. If you want to pay for college, you can figure out where you're gonna go. I said, it does not have to be Hampton, but as long as it's an HBCU, I'll help you. Those, it's just the relationships and the feeling that you get when you step on that campus. And even with people who don't attend the same HBCU as you do, it's just a connection with anyone that attends a HBCU. Oh, you went to FAM? Oh my gosh, I went to Hampton. Oh, you went to Tuskegee? Oh my gosh, I went to Hampton. It's just on a totally different level. And I think for us just to see so much excellence in one place, because you grow up in an area where it's super diverse, even though everyone says, oh, going to a HBCU is not real world because the whole world is not surrounded by Blacks. And they're right, it isn't. But it's amazing to be able to see so many successful Black people in one place, because you hear so much negative thoughts about minorities. And then for you to be able to go to school and you can say, oh, one of the alumni from Hampton, she designed the costumes for Wakanda. You can just like throw different things out there and they're like, oh, I had no idea. Oh, they don't hear about it. But now, it's becoming a lot more popular in the sense that everybody's starting to hear more about HBCUs.
Yeah, my wife did not go to a HBCU. She went to Ohio University. She's from Toledo, Ohio originally. And so she always jokes me when I'm around friends from Hampton, and she'll say, you're the only people I know that feel the need to define what a peninsula is. Like we'll say, oh, we went to Hampton University, it's one of the only HBCUs that's, on a peninsula, so we're surrounded by water on three sides. She's like, why do you need to define that? Like, I know what a peninsula is.
I would say for me,
yeah, go ahead.
Am I freezing?
No, you're good.
You're good, go ahead.
Sorry, my phone or my screen just froze. Our home by the sea, for me, was a nurturing environment. I was in, I would say the place where I grew up, it was diverse, but I was in all of the gifted classes, which I was maybe one of 2 or 3 Blacks throughout my entire high school program. I hung with everyone, but in those gifted courses, there were just a few of us. And so actually stepping on Hampton's campus and this home by the sea with all of these Black professionals, and it was just such an encouraging environment that they just made me, it was empowering, and they made me believe that I could be anything. I could dream big. Nothing was impossible. And so it was just so inspiring to just have people encourage you instead of use microaggressions and try to label you. In particular, I was in high school and I was in gifted honors. And there was a girl that we did the same identical thing. She was Caucasian, I'm Black. We were both trumpet players. We were, I was the drum major, she was in the band. I was a cheerleader, she was a cheerleader. We had the same grades. And one day we were talking in our honors class on what our future careers were. And of course, I'm going back to the Huxtable thing. I'm going to be a physician. And she said the same thing. And the professor actually looked at me and said, I don't think you're going to be a physician. And she didn't even really give a reason. But to me, as that one Black child in the entire English honors class, I'm thinking the only difference is that we're different skin color, And so stepping on Hampton's campus where you didn't have those microaggressions, you didn't have someone putting you in a box and telling you what you were going to become. If you wanted to dream big, you were going to become that physician, that dentist, whatever you dreamed, it was possible. And so it just totally it was a game changer for me to have an environment where people were encouraging you and helping you accomplish those goals, such as Dr. Marino, helping us do, interviewing skills, giving us tips on taking the DAT, letting us go out and meet people and shadow other dentists. It just was a game changer for me. So.
Yeah, I agree. I'm still like best friends with my friends I met that first week in Hampton. One of my best friends, she's from Toledo, Ohio. She is a Sora Rana as well. And so, yes, right. And she's a physician as well. She's a OBGYN. And you're right. When you're on that campus, you see nothing but positive Black of affirmations, even though you may be viewing what you see on TV, which is a completely different world. I remember meeting some people outside of Hampton, or when I was in dental school, and they said some disparaging thing about African Americans, and it was like amazing. I was in dental school, and I just looked at them like everyone I knew was amazing who was an African American. I grew up, maybe not, my parents weren't, educated like my father, my mom was, but just because they didn't attend a university doesn't mean they're not educated in something. And then my family and friends who I met at Hampton were all successful. So I didn't know, of, these things I saw on TV really and truly portrayed culturally for us. Hampton was great. I mean, it was some of the best times of my life. I could go back. I would love to, because it's definitely an environment where you're supported. I would say that I'm not saying you won't struggle or that things won't be hard, but it's nice to experience that with people who look like you, who also feel the same way, and so have cultural kind of similarities. And I think that's a good thing to have, because like Dr. Gaines said, the rest of the world isn't going to be just this microcosm where you're usually surrounded just by that one culture. So I think it's good that you do have that kind of experience moving forward.
It's interesting that you say that, and we know how small the world is, and we say that all the time. And one day I showed up in clinic to my office, and I saw this guy. I'm like, gosh, he looks familiar. And so I said, where are you from? So, he told me where he was from. I was like, no, that's not it. I was like, where do you work? Because it's like, I know I've seen your face before. And he told me where he worked. I was like, no, that's not. I said, where'd you go to school? He said, well, I got my master's from Hampton. I said, you were in my class. It was actually, he got his master's, and we had, I was a chemistry major, and some of the master's students took some of the courses with us. And he was actually in my class.
Wow.
And I was like, what are the chances that someone that was actually in school with me at Hampton is actually sitting in my chair right now? So I thought that was kind of crazy.
That's fascinating. So I think, obviously you guys are all delivering in unique ways this message about how prepared you felt, and how, Hampton really prepared you to enter into other arenas. So let's shift that conversation a little bit and talk about your time here at VCU, your time in dental school. And so I think particularly one of the positive disruptors, if you will, that COVID laid bare was that, the focus on kind of disparity and inequity really became coffee table conversation for everyone, as opposed to simply folks who maybe lived in that existence kind of always, right? So with that being said, and you guys really being double minorities as women and Black women in particular, do you think your experience as a dental student here was colored in any way by your race or ethnicity or your background or your status as a woman? Certainly, I know that still I interact with students and they'll say, I'm a dental student, like out on the campus somewhere else, and they're female, and people be like, oh, like you're gonna be a hygienist? And it's like, no, like you're a dental student, like that's what I just said, right? And so share with us a little bit, if you will, what those experiences were like, or if you felt like expectations maybe were different for you, or if you were encouraged particularly or discouraged particularly And I don't know who wants to start there, but kind of share with us some of your experience as a dental student here at VCU.
Well, I attended
Thanks.
I attended from 94 to 98. So it wasn't, I think it was one in the 4th year class, one in the 3rd year class, I think 1 or 2 in the 2nd year class. And I think initially I was 1 of 4 in the 1st year class. And it really wasn't easy. I had no family in Richmond. All my family was in Florida. So I didn't see my apartment. I picked it out of a book and kind of just signed a lease over the phone type thing and fax machine, and moved into an apartment without seeing it, without knowing anything. And it was a huge adjustment for me. And Regina, who worked in the admissions office for Dr. Brownstein, she was actually like my mom while I was in school. And I still talk to her very often, even now. Years later, we ate lunch almost every day together. I went to church with her and visited her at her house. And it was like I became a part of her family. It's like she adopted me because I really had no one. I mean, even though it was a few of us in my class, it just wasn't what I was used to. And I really did feel alone. And initially it wasn't the greatest. I had issue with pharmacology professor, and it just made it a little uncomfortable in the sense that I almost left school. So, I was able to, get some things resolved and I was able to stay, but it was tough. And I didn't feel like I had any support, besides her. I could talk to her about what was going on, but I didn't feel like there was a good support system. The only faculty member initially that was there was Dr. Foster, and he was amazing, but it wasn't where you could really confide in what you were experiencing with him and to feel like you would get some type of result or some type of assistance because of that. So it was hard for me. Do I feel like I made the right choice? Absolutely. Would I do it all over again? Absolutely. But, it was that during that time, it was extremely difficult.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And just to clarify, you started by saying you kind of were one or 2 in this class, 1 or 2 in that class. You mean other African-American students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, what's really fascinating is so much of the literature, so much of the research actually supports what you just talked about. There's lots of research that talks about, as African-Americans or other historically marginalized populations, Latino, other folks of color, and now folks that maybe identify as LGBTQ, all these kinds of different identity markers, 2 people can enter, particularly in a professional school space, and experience that space very differently. And I think we're aware of that now, but I think hearing these narratives is even still helpful as we create systems to help support students that look like you, right? Anyone else want to share what their experience was like here at VCU?
I started in 2000, so I graduated in 2004. And at the time they had admitted, there were 6 of us. And I remember a visit, this is probably not great, but I don't remember who said it to us, but they had us in a room, all 6 of us, because we all sat together. You see someone who looks like you, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna sit by you. And one of the faculty members said, wow, this is the most we've ever admitted at this time. And I was like, oh my goodness, they just want here. And he told me that he didn't think we would all make it. That kind of hurt my heart. And he was right. That's what kind of made me mad. So dentistry or dental school, like you said, in a professional space, it was very hard. I had never picked up a handpiece. I had never really worked on something small. It seemed like the other students banded together, had material to share, was able to form these groups in order to succeed, and we were kind of outcast. But, you know, I think dental school teaches you to be strong and to start believing in yourself. Most of us had succeeded in undergrad, even in high school, being one of the bright, intelligent kids. And for me, dental school was humbling. It was the first time I received an F in a course. And I remember thinking, and it was in fixed, like, oh my God, that was a whole semester. It's going to set me back. All my classmates could do fixed work, and I had a semester to get all of my units kind of done. And I did it. And I couldn't believe I did. And I had to work with the faculty members who no one wanted to work with just to make sure I could get done. So I was berated. I was, told I was like, what are you doing? All this different stuff from the faculty members. But I think in a weird way, coming from a military background, that's how the military is too. I actually think that was a blessing for me. And I learned so much more than I think if I would have just got the appointments with the faculty member that everyone liked to work with, because they were booked so far out. But dental school as a whole, I think there are some really good things that came out of it. But for me, it was challenging. It was really hard. I probably have a little different view. I tell people I love dentistry. I do. But I don't think I could go back to school again with the experience I had and still be a dentist. I don't think so. I don't think I would choose not knowing what I know. If I know everything that I know now, it would have been hard for me because they didn't make it easy, and it was difficult. But I love dentistry as a profession. I think being in education now, when we went to dental school, I'll say, it's very direct, very harsh. They talk about this now, about having a holistic environment, because not everyone thrives with berating people, right? If you are constantly putting someone down, sometimes people will believe they can't achieve these things. And so it's not conducive to learning. So I think it's good that things have changed. I do feel that I think we're very diverse in our student bodies for who we accept in now. Not only just gender-wise or LGBTQ or even race-wise. I don't think we're as diverse in our faculty numbers. So I definitely think that's a space where people should consider in the healthcare field to go into education. So I think we're good at getting lots of students of different cultural backgrounds, but I still don't think as far as education wise, that we could do better, I think, with diversifying our faculty members.
Monique, it's interesting that you say that because when I applied to dental school, when I was interviewed, one of the faculty members told me that you do realize that it's a very slim to no chance for you getting accepted, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but all I'm asking for is an opportunity. And I said, if I'm given that opportunity, I can promise you that I'm going to make it through without a problem. And once I got accepted into the program, when I ended up having him in a course, he was one of the orthodontists. I was like, do you remember me? And he was like, no. I was like, you interviewed me for dental school and you told me that it was a slim to no possibility of me getting accepted. And look, here I am.
Yeah.
But it's like, you shouldn't tell you
should never say that to an incumbent.
No, you should never say that to anyone that is interested in your program. And with me being a faculty, and I was on the admissions committee for an extended period of time, and I'm the only Black full-time faculty member at my school, the only one.
Yeah.
And whether it's a minority student, African-American, it doesn't matter. I always have my door open to anyone because I know it's not easy.
Mhm.
And you need to have someone that you can talk with and express your issues with. And especially now, it's like mental health has been in the forefront of everything. And it's so important, and you have to give them an escape. They need to have some place that they can go and someone that they can talk to that's going to actually listen and not judge them based on what they're sharing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Of course, because I do DEI and I travel and I lecture at dental schools and kind of organizations all over. It's often pushback I have received at times. I'll be talking about the literal principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're talking about how to define these principles, how to define these terms, what they mean, what it means in related to patient care, what it means to inequities, and almost inevitably, there's always going to be at least one person that has a question, and they're going to start the question by saying, but, I believe everyone needs to be competent. And so I'll say, well, I'm sorry, when did we introduce competence into the conversation? I'm assuming competence, right? I don't understand how we're conflating the fact that I'm talking to you about the principles of inclusion, and you're saying, but I want someone competent. That's presumed, right? We're not lessening the bar. We're not lowering any type of standard. Everyone has the ability. And I was even having a conversation of some sort of that today when we were talking about this notion of, there is a hyper focus and it's necessary to get students technically proficient, right? But we can do that in an environment that is human-centered. That is not full of the microaggression, that's not full of the bullying, that's not full of the berating. I remember being at a meeting at the ADA of some folks, and someone was kind of remarking, oh, well, folks just need to kind of toughen up, they need to have thicker skin. And I didn't mean it in a trite way, but I said, so when did we become leather? I don't understand like how we went from human beings to leather. I'm not leather that you work out, kinks in. And needing to toughen up in that way. So I think we've have made improvements, but we still have some room for improvements for sure. How about you, Dr. Graham-Montaque? Is there anything you want to share about your experience while at VCU?
So I attended school from 2002 to 2006. So I was there for a few years with Monique. And there were four of us, 4 Black students, and 2 boys, 2 girls. And we knew that the class ahead of us had 6 or 7. So we were a smaller number. And we were determined that all of us, we had heard the stories. We knew that some students that I had known had failed out. And we knew that 4 of us, we were going to make it out. And all 4 of us had this band where we were going to do, by any means necessary, we were going to get through this program. Ironically, I had other acceptances to dental school. And as I was trying to make my official decision, a local dentist who wrote a letter of recommendation called me at like the last week when she knew I had to make my commitment to a school. And she begged me not to go to VCU. She had gone to a majority school in the Boston area and felt like she had been targeted in dental school. And she encouraged me to actually go to to Howard or Meharry instead, because I would be in a different environment where I would be nurtured versus targeted. What she reminded me, she said, VCU or certain schools, they'll let you in, but that doesn't mean they're going to let you graduate. And so my mindset coming in when I committed to VCU was that by any means necessary, I was graduating from that school. They were not going to fail me out. So I kind of came in with a different mindset, and it was like, come on, crew, we're going to get through this and no one's going to kick us out of school. I'll tell you about a story that kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I was there. I was the Student National Dental Association president. One particular year, we went to the national conference. We won chapter of the year. And before we left, the assistant dean approved all of us, the students that were attending, gave us permission to miss like the first week of school to attend this conference. We took that approval and passed it on to all of our professors in a courteous email. So we didn't have to, as the president, I sent like this generic email that was considerate to everyone. And one particular teacher, there was a 1 credit course that we were taking. She decided that that approval was not good enough because we were going to the NDA conference. When we returned, we had to have a meeting with her where she berated us and told us that just like if you work at McDonald's, you have to ask your boss permission. You needed to ask me personally permission to leave and attend the NDA conference. She dropped us a letter grade in which, and this is the first week of school, so we went from an A to a B for going to the NDA conference. 2 weeks later, the other students went to the ADA conference with her approval, no issues. As the president of the SNDA, I actually met with the assistant dean to, complain about that situation and to try to get assistance so we didn't get dropped the letter grade. And this teacher put me on academic probation, not for failing her class. She put me on like a clinical academic probation where the students that were failing clinically in class would have to show this letter when you were seeing patients. It was so humbling and embarrassing. And I hadn't failed anything in the program. And so I had to show this letter before and after I guess did a clinical patient that showed I was on academic probation for about 2 weeks until finally my father said, if you do not make some changes there, and I'm not sure who he came with me to like, I think the assistant dean, he was like, I'm going to file a complaint if you all don't make some changes very fast. And so I quickly came off of academic probation for not failing, just for speaking out. And I kind of, at that point, decided I was going to keep my mouth closed a lot more, stop speaking out as much as I could, and just coast out of graduating from dental school. I think those experiences, those microaggressions, and it wasn't all of the professors, but it definitely existed, where I felt like the Black students were treated different. I felt like our classmates were all fair and they were kind. They did have information that they didn't share in their special packages they passed down. But there were other professors that witnessed some of the microaggressions and injustices that we experienced, and they actually helped us more because they felt our pain and they saw exactly what was going on. I think that all of this made me, unlike my Hampton experience where I had like the time of my life, when dental school was done, I was done. I did not want to go to a residency at the time. I was ready to get out of VCU, I'll be honest. And I went into public health for 4 years until I love pediatrics, but I was just burnt out. It was such a difficult program and it was unlike anything I had experienced. And so it took me about 4 years before I realized that I truly love pediatric dentistry. And then by then I was married. I had a 2-year-old and I matched at VCU and I had a mortgage and a child in preschool. So I went right back into VCU in residency, but it was definitely a different experience on the resident side than it was in undergrad. So in all, I wouldn't change my choices of where I attended school, but there definitely were some challenges for people of color during that time. And I would say, there may be some that still exist because, even after I graduated, there were still students that did not want to return after we graduated because of those experiences.
Yeah, I appreciate you being so direct and forthright with some of those experiences. I think sometimes when we're still, even today, wrestling and dealing with either perception of all of those things that happen, right? So that's a real thing that we still encounter, even in recruiting new students or students here, that there may be a perception in the community or from Black dentists in the community that this isn't a welcoming place, right? Because of this incident or incidences similarly. So I really appreciate you sharing that, even as we attempt to evolve and change. But I think these stories are so important because sometimes you don't have to see this stuff if you don't want to. Like if it's not, I'll say it this way. So my wife is biracial. Her mother is white and of Polish descent, and she's been married to my father-in-law for almost 50 years, right? But even sometimes today, I can see how uncomfortable she is when we start talking about race, right? You've been married to this Black man for almost 50 years, and you're tensing up. And so one time we had a really nice conversation, and she just said, Carlos, white people don't grow up talking about race. like, it's not a discussion. So it always feels a little bit like, oh, am I going to say the wrong thing, or what's going to be said, or am I going to step into like the wrong part of the conversation? And it's interesting because I think unless we share these stories and these narratives, there are people who make decisions, who serve on admissions committees, who will never know that these things actually happen and are actually the experiences of some of our alumni and some of our students, unless we talk about them, and not from an assigning guilt place, but from a learning place to say, hey, we can course correct and we can be an environment where people can prep that 5DO perfectly, can deliver that, overdenture or whatever they need to do for the technical proficiency, but we can do this in a humanistic environment where everyone feels like they belong and no one feels like they're belittled. And we still are working on it, right? I don't want to paint some utopia, but I think that's not just VCU, that's any dental school. And I think you could stop any person of color from a myriad of decades across dental education, and they're going to have a story to share about some type of experience along that line. So I think that's really, really powerful that you guys were able to share that. I know our time is like cutting short, but I would love to also, engage you kind of around what do you see, how do you see dentistry or dental education being more inclusive? How do you think a difference is being made, particularly those of you that are educators now? How do you see it as different from when you were a student or when you were that singular resident? Have we made strides? Where do we still need to improve?
I think for me, because I've been in academia for nearly 24 years, I've seen it evolve significantly. One of the biggest things that I've noticed is where I am at least, they're more student friendly. I never would think in a million years, just because I had 5 exams on one day, for me to approach the professors and ask them if they can change their exams. Like, that would never happen. And now if they have more than 2 exams on a day, they're complaining and they need more time. And, they're a lot more accommodating to the wants and the wishes of the students. And I tell the students that all the time. It's like, I would never dream of forming my lips to ask an instructor to change anything, but I get it. Those are the times that we live in now. I just hope that eventually it'll get to a point where it's not just Tufts, or it's not just Meharry, and it's not just Howard that have more minority students. I want it to be the VCUs. I want it to be the Novas and the Colorados and the Las Vegas schools to have more as well. What can we do? I feel like if we are a little bit more vocal and we put ourselves out there a little bit more to try to encourage African-American students to consider it as a profession, I think that makes a difference. I have a lot of students that come through and they shadow me in the clinic or when I'm teaching. And it's like, I hope that I'm encouraging them to really seriously consider dentistry as a profession, excuse me. But, it's not something, it's not for everybody. And I tell people that all the time. It's like, this really, truly has to be something that you want to do. Like, it's not just, oh, I think that this is what I want to do. No, dentistry is something that you have to be passionate about, and it has to be what you want to do. It's not a fly-by-night career. It works as a female, I feel, just because of the flexibility of your schedule. You can you have so much more control over what's going on, as unlike with medicine, you don't. With dentistry, you do have that control, and you can kind of dictate your schedule, which makes a huge difference. And I really think it's a very family-friendly, family-oriented profession. And I think that works for a lot of people. And I wish that we could encourage more African Americans to go into academia as well, because the students need to see more people like us. But it's so hard because the pay is horrible. I mean, I'm just being honest, you know, the pay is bad, you know, and you can't persuade someone to give up making a ton more money than, you know, they would, you know, doing teaching. You know, it's a huge disparity in what you have to deal with as opposed to what people are doing on the outside.
Yeah. Others on that?
Oh, go ahead,
You
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, from what I recall, and I still kind of, I somewhat keep up with VCU and their recruitment. I feel like we still are recruiting about the same 2 to 7 Black students per year. Is that so accurate?
I would say on average, there's probably about 5 to 6 students that are enrolling in each class. They're more admitted, right? And so I think there's certainly, we have to have some real conversations about why then they don't select VCU as their school of choice, right? Whether that is scholarship based, whether that is reputation based, right? Whether that is environment based or support based and all those kinds of things. I know right now, I think we have around 8 that are signed on to come in the class in the fall. So that would be fantastic. But sometimes then a more financially savvy, or not financially savvy, a more well-heeled institution, kind of like a UPenn or a Tufts, will then snap them up and offer them more scholarships, so we lose them like that. So, but I do know our admissions office and our new dean is very committed to this as an issue. And I don't say that just because I work here. I say that because I think that that really is their intention. Yeah.
Well, I would say, I feel like we should certainly recruit, of course, more minority students, because the data shows that those minority students, those students from underprivileged backgrounds tend to go and work in those underserved areas. So, for example, when I applied for residency, everyone did their interview and said how they were going to help underserved, and they were going to see patients with special healthcare needs, and they were going to take Medicaid, and they were going to do all these things. And then as soon as they got their degree, they went into private practice, they stopped seeing special healthcare needs. I have patients driving from North Carolina, Maryland, Roanoke, all over to get dental surgeries in my office. And so when you call the Virginia, the VDA, and ask for a pediatric dentist that's going to do general anesthesia on special healthcare needs, they actually give out my name. And they pass several pediatric dentists from Richmond all the way to get to me that may not see those special healthcare needs patients. And I'm burnt out, I'll be honest. I feel like our applicants, even though they may say they're going to do this to get into dental school, we need to find the people that are truly going to serve those communities, because there's a great need. And if you admit students that claim that they're going to work in these environments, and then they go to private practice and fee for service, or and then we're really not solving the problem. It's the few offices that take those insurances, and we're burnt out. We need help. So
it's so hard for them to do that when they have $1 million in student loan debt.
I know, and I get that. I get that. It's hard for me to run my practice and get lower reimbursement.
Right.
But you know, there has to be a balance where it can't all be about profit. And so it's hard to scrutinize who's truly being honest about their reason for going into dentistry.
Yeah.
But
they have started some new schools. I think the school in South Carolina, East South Carolina, dental school is centered around community. It's a smaller number of applicants that actually apply because they have to stay in the state because the state needs dentists so much. Like you say, people apply, say what they need to say to get into school, and then they kind of go and do what they want, because as Dr. Gaines is saying, the financial commitment is, it's a lot, especially if you're going to go into if you go into specialty as well. And I'm like her. I do not make as much money. I'm also in the military too. I serve in the National Guard to help supplement. I practice, I have all these hats in dentistry. But I do think that it is important to keep recruiting. Really, the studies show at a lower level. So like in elementary and middle school are your target audience, is not when they're already in college. They've already made up their mind, or I mean, you were rare, Raina, you are sure, but most people, if you want to try and get their attention, it has to start in elementary levels. So I think it's still important. Patients today, even when I cover, you get the like, oh, are you the hygienist? And you say, no, I'm the doctor. And they're like, oh, wow. I get that, you know, they think I'm young. I'm not young. You know, I've been practicing for over 18 years. And still people think, oh, you know, that you don't know anything. I used to be actually a vice chair of a department. I was a director of comprehensive. I've done lots of things. I want to kind of rewind a little bit just on our conversation of VCU and the humanistic environment. I wanted to say that I think sometimes those conversations about race can get, like with the story that you shared with your mother-in-law, are people think in binary terms a lot of times. Same even when you are an educator or you're a faculty member at the school. We have lots of diverse cultures. You cannot just teach one way. Even me, that having that one negative, even if it's one negative experience as a student, can really cloud your overall picture or judgment. And I don't want to be that for any of my students. Do I have bad days? 100%. Am I too direct for some people? 100%. Right? But it's something different when it comes from a person of color sometimes, or how they perceive it. So I'm really, really aware of trying to make sure not only to encourage my students of color, also my Caucasian students as well, but I am very big on trying to make sure that no one is left behind. There are always going to be a student that struggles. I tend to gravitate toward them, maybe because I struggle too, and I know they can do it. But hearing it from a person, not only a female, minority, is encouraging for patients, for the students, for your colleagues who are around you as well in these spaces. So I think it is a good thing that we have these type of conversations. I don't know how to solve the income equality, not only on the private practice level, but also in education. That's a whole, another topic, but it's still something that you want to do. So people say, well, why are you teaching? And I say, obviously it's not for money. That's not why I do this. I do this because I want to see more people I wish I would have saw more people who look like me doing this, because it meant that I could do it as well. So my mom, as being an educator, it has always instilled in me the importance of teaching and giving back. So I think that's really why I do it. It's not for the paycheck, obviously. But I will say that I think things are getting better. I do think that from the environment we were taught in, I do think being more student-centered and being individualized is a good thing. Not just like you were saying, they need to toughen up. Not everyone can survive in just being tough. And yeah, sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, I have to make all these accommodations, but it's just different. And you have to learn to evolve with the world as well.
Yeah, this has been so rich and so much fun. I really appreciate all of your insights and your perspectives. I think there's so much that we touched on, right? There's larger conversations to Dr. Graham-Montaque's point about, who is allowed to become a dentist, right? And what are the barriers in place? There are lots of conversations even about the DAT, right? Pharmacy has let go of their test as a barrier. The LSAT has become optional for many law schools. Many medical schools are pulling out of rankings. So I think there will begin to be more and more conversations around looking at our admissions practices, policies, and standards, and recognizing who is often left out, right? And how do we continue to leave them out? Or I was at a meeting in August where David Satcher was featured, and it's like he wrote the Surgeon General report 20 years ago, and we haven't really enacted the recommendations he made back then around representation of providers, right? So I think those conversations are happening. I think the more of us that are at the table, the more robust those conversations are able to be. So I just really appreciate your time, particularly Dr. Gaines in Portugal. I know you're ready to go to bed, but I really appreciate everyone coming together and sharing your heart and sharing your thoughts around these topics. Any parting words or last things you want to say before we sign off for the evening? I appreciate so many people staying on this whole time. We had pre-dents on, we have SNDA students on, we have faculty, alumni, we have staff on. Dr. Carolyn Booker was even on at one point, which is a name I know many of you might remember and know, who works at ADIA now and was our Associate Dean of Students for many years. So I just appreciate everybody. Our Dean is
Dr.
on.
Janice
so
is on here. He was
Yeah.
one of my professors way back when.
Yeah, Dr. Janice is still around in Pros and teaching removable. So keeping the students together. So yeah, and our new dean, Dr. Cooper, who you guys may not have had the chance to meet, is on the call as well. So any parting thoughts or words?
I just want to say thank you for reaching out to me so I could have this opportunity. I think sometimes me being on the East Coast, like I'm completely far, I mean, from the West Coast, completely kind of removed from you guys on the East Coast. I don't get back out to Virginia very often anymore. So just having the opportunity to talk to you all has been great. I'm in spaces with my own school for diversity issues and spaces with diversity in the military for the state that I'm attached to. But these conversations still need to happen. I'm still encouraged by all of the faces of color that I get to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's a good thing. And I just thank you for the opportunity to talk and share with you guys today.
Thank you. Anybody else parting thoughts or words at all they want to share?
Carlos, I appreciate you allowing me this opportunity to speak with everyone. I hadn't seen Rana in a couple of years, and to meet Dr. Phipps is great. I definitely need to get in contact with you so we can kind of brainstorm and see what we can do, and I can try to send some students your way too.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I'm just excited because I think sometimes the narrative, like you have to own the narrative, right? And I think we have so many awesome graduates of VCU that are women and men of color, right? Like I did a Hispanic Heritage Month talk with the Dean of the University of Florida College of Dentistry, who's a VCU grad. And so I think sometimes people just don't know, right, that you're out here and you're not these unicorns that society pretends that we are. There are plenty of dynamic, awesome, well-rounded, super professional, super skilled Black women. And so it's just my privilege. I know Dr. Phipps and Dr. Graham-Montaque won't remember. They were seniors when I was a freshman at Hampton. And so I remember their faces.
You're aging us.
I remember their faces very loosely. And I certainly remember that Rana was like president of the pre-health society or club or something at one point. But yes, I'm just grateful that you guys said yes to the invitation and that we had a great conversation this evening. Dr. Graham-Montaque, do you have a last word at all?
Keep up the great work, Dr. Carlos. And I do remember you. You were, I think you were one of my sorority sisters' little brother.
I was. I probably Keisha Taylor and Janisha Hennigan is like, those are some of my big sibs. Yeah.
Keep
So
up the
thank
great.
you.
Let us
We're
know.
working hard. It's a team effort. It's a collective effort. It's collaboration. We're getting more faculty of color. Hopefully we'll be able to announce soon a new female faculty that's joining our general practice department in March. That's a African-American faculty. So we're excited about bringing more folks on board and just making this a place where, again, everyone feels like they belong. Yeah. So thanks so much this evening. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for hanging there with us and having this great dialogue. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.